Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet podcast. I am your host and resident panelist, as always, Ryan Schlipp. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. So today we're going to kind of stick to the formula. We're going to start off by looking at a more schematic breakdown of the Dallas Cowboys. Yesterday, we went through their roster and a little bit of the team overview statistically and whatnot, so if you didn't listen to that, go check that out first. But today just goes a little bit more in depth of the kind of team that we're going to see, sort of the identity, philosophy, how they like to play, how they want to play football. So we'll start with that and then go through the Sunday matchups, and we'll leave it at that. So why don't we just go ahead and dive in? So we already covered the coaching staff, and that it is, it's been more or less overhauled. Mike McCarthy was the head coach and play caller with the assistance of Schottenheimer as the offensive coordinator. Mike McCarthy was let go. Schottenheimer was promoted as the OC to be the new head coach. He then brought in Clayton Adams to be his offensive coordinator, and then they brought in Matt Eberflus to be the defensive coordinator. There's however many changes underneath that as well, but that's not really necessary to get into. You would kind of assume that the promotion of Schottenheimer would, there would be a lot of continuity. Turns out, that's very, very far from the truth. There is not a lot of continuity offensively or defensively. Schottenheimer has decided to take a completely new approach, not even just schematically, but just in terms of how he leads as the head coach. I've talked about before on the podcast how you kind of have this weird thing that happens where, you know, you got a guy that comes in and he leads with an iron fist and everything to kind of whip up and bring in a more solid culture to the group. And then when that goes south, you know, usually there's a whole bunch of talk about how it's whatever. They bring in a guy that is a little bit more fun, a little bit more player-centric, right? They put the ping pong tables back in the locker room and do all that kind of stuff. And then, you know, things get a little sloppy and then that goes bad. And what do? They go get a tough guy who comes in and is no nonsense. And it's just kind of this vacillation back and forth. Well, Mike McCarthy is a little bit of a old school, hardcore structure type of a guy. Schottenheimer's a little bit more player focused. He's getting rid of the rotating weekly captain thing, the seasonal mottos, rigid practice structures, and instead he's bringing in music, energy, and connection-based leadership. Changed around all the lockers, who sits next to who, and all that stuff. So basically, I mean, he just had a very different philosophical belief in how a team should be run and even how an offense should be run. So whereas before he operated as a helper to Mike McCarthy and the way that he liked to do business, Schottenheimer is actually a very different person with entirely different beliefs and schematic understandings and coaching tree and all that stuff. And so he's being handed the keys. And so, you know, as Packer fans, we have a decent understanding of Mike McCarthy and how he likes to do things. McCarthy was much more static. He liked to run out of 11 personnel, not a lot of motion, right? And forget all that nonsense, all that fancy doodad garbage. Just line up in 11 personnel, run the routes, and go win. That might be the one thing that seems to be in agreement between the two is sort of this players over scheme mentality. But outside of that, still very different. Schottenheimer, funny enough, going through kind of Schottenheimer's philosophy, it reminds me very much of what we talked about with the Browns. It's a very big shift, and it's a shift toward a thing that is, again, pretty similar to what Cleveland was getting back to last week. Constant shifting and motions under Schottenheimer. He's a very big believer in motion and all that stuff. One of the highest motion rates in the NFL. Orbit motion, jet sweeps, misdirection, all that stuff. Moving away from the 11 personnel toward more of a 12, 13 personnel, right? So again, we're kind of moving back to a Matt LaFleur style offense. It is a Cleveland Browns style offense. McCarthy ran more of a simple zone type of a run game. One of the departures from Cleveland and Dallas now is that Dallas under Schottenheimer, more gap scheme, pulling guards and all that, counter-heavy concepts. One of the biggest losses, I guess, is losing the guard that they picked at 12. I don't know this because I know the left guard plays a big part in this, but the right guard they picked at, I believe, 12 overall. That's a pretty high place to take a guard. Well, it's because we're shifting our offensive philosophy behind this very run-heavy 12 personnel type of thing. And so, by the way, that's where Clayton Adams comes in, the offensive coordinator. I had mentioned that maybe Eberflus kind of put it in a word because I think he was in Indy for a while. But Adams is 19 years of coaching experience, primarily offensive line and run concepts. 2024, Arizona Cardinals ranked second in yards per carry at 5.02, third in rushing offense at 141.6 yards per game, and allowing just 30 sacks. His whole philosophy is creating violence in the run game, pulling guards, gap schemes. So he was brought in to do that. And then the first pick is a big athletic guard. So that's a big part of what they want to do, is to get these really talented, big run-blocking guards. Now, again, the rookie wasn't doing a great job, but losing him is a big loss because just being able to physically do what they're asking them to do is going to be difficult using different human beings. The ability to pull and lead block and that athleticism that is needed to be able to pull that off. Again, there's a reason they took a guy as high as they did. And remember, their other guard is Tyler Smith, who was also a first-round pick. Now, they took him a while ago, but again, these are kind of central pieces here in what they're asking these guys to do. Again, Tyler Smith has fallen off dramatically in terms of his run and pass blocking, presumably because he's being asked to do a very different thing than he was ever asked to do under McCarthy. And whether he figures it out or not, I don't know. But the point is, these guards are central, and one of the guards will not be playing in this game. So they're switching from a little more of a pro-style McCarthy offense to an up-tempo. It's actually a Seattle-based offense. Schottenheimer comes from, well, he's obviously the son of Marty Schottenheimer, but he developed kind of under the tree of Pete Carroll in Seattle, 2018 to 2020. So up-tempo, motion, vertical passing. And that is something to keep an eye on because they do have quite a bit of speed, right? They're down some wide receivers and whatnot, but they got some guys that can stretch the field, and that is a big part of what they're trying to do. So although theoretically it's going to be hard for them to do what they want to do, which is run first, similar to what we said about Cleveland. You start with the run, but you can't run. It's actually similar to Green Bay too, but still, they're going to want to take a shot over the top, and you have to be careful because they have the horses to do it. So the defense is still going to need to be on their toes a little bit. Some of the key tactical elements, like to run a lot of 3 and 4 verticals. They want to create that space so that they can work underneath with the shallow crosses, RPOs, especially in the red zone. They mix up a lot of what they do, shotgun, pistol, wildcat. It's a much more complex offense than what Mike McCarthy ran. Doesn't necessarily mean good, but it does create some strain as a defensive coordinator to kind of wrap your head around everything that they're doing and all the different looks. And you know, you got to make sure that your defensive players, even if a defensive coordinator doesn't really have a hard time understanding what to do, you still have to be able to convey that to the players who are being shown a lot of different eye candy. And so having a disciplined defense is going to be, key. And again, it has not been very successful up to this point. Again, the quarterback is doing a great job, but some of the guys like Tyler Smith and whatnot, struggling a little bit to kind of figure this whole situation out. And as I said yesterday, outside of the 40 banger that they put up on the New York Giants, the offense has not really been very productive in their other 2 games so far. So even the statistics can be a little bit deceiving because anything positive about it came out of that Giants game. All right, defensively, we got Matt Eberflus. The Packers do have some familiarity with that. We are familiar with Eberflus when he was the head coach of the Chicago Bears. most well known for his time as the defensive coordinator in Indianapolis, where he made a name for himself. But prior to that, he actually was a longtime Dallas Cowboy. He spent 7 successful seasons as a Dallas linebackers coach from 2011 to 2017 before going to Indy with his 4 seasons there, 3 of which he had a top 10 defense. So he is a successful defensive coordinator, but, depending on what you're walking into, it could potentially take some time. He is the progenitor of the HITS philosophy, which is one of the most hilarious things ever. HITS, H-I-T-S. I swear this sounds like it's straight out of The Office. It stands for hustle, intensity, takeaways, and smart. Couldn't you just called it HIT? Could you have just called it HIT and said hustle, intensity, and takeaways? Come on now. And smart? Stupid. It would almost seem better if you put the S in the front, so it's smart, hustle, intensity, takeaways, but I could understand where that would potentially be a problem. Although, given what happened in Chicago, it would be appropriate. Kids, don't spell that out, please. But unlike Cleveland, where it's a very similar philosophy, except the run game, the defensive philosophy is almost the opposite. In fact, if Cleveland was Jeff Hafley, Eberflus is Mike Pettin. Maybe Joe Barry would even be a more apt comparison. I tried to not say Joe Barry just because I didn't want to get people too much chum in the water. Joe Barry is just an insult in Green Bay, and I'm not trying to just be insulting to Matt Eberflus. I'm just saying it is a complete departure from the style of defense that we run and that Cleveland showed us last week, which is a good thing because the offense we saw last week didn't pose a lot of problems. The defense absolutely did. So first of all, he does come straight out of Tampa Bay's tradition. He learned under Rod Marinelli, Monty Kiffin, Tony Dungy. And when I say he comes out of Tampa Bay's tradition, what do you think of when you hear Tampa Bay or Tampa? It's Tampa 2, right? It's a popular coverage, but more or less defensive philosophy that is pretty popular in the NFL right now. Maybe not as much as it was 3-4 years ago, but still very popular. That's where he comes out of. It is a bend, don't break type of defense. I know. You're getting all giddy inside. It's another one of those things that's such a, it has such a negative connotation among Packer fans and probably beyond that, but it has such a negative connotation that it's almost surprising when a defensive philosophy kind of embraces the idea that it's a bend, don't break defense. You know what I mean? Why would you admit that? That's freaking crazy. So you just come out and say that you suck, huh? Wow, all right. But I think that largely comes from the fact that we've never seen something bend and not break. To be fair, I don't think Dallas has seen anything bend and not break this year either, but maybe someday. This is a very different schematic thing than Dallas was running under Mike Zimmer. Zimmer was very disguise-heavy, man coverage, aggressive blitzing. This is more zone coverage, vanilla, Tampa 2. It's like the 4-3 version of a Vic Fangio defense. And it's funny because the offense and defense have kind of passed each other. The offense went from more of this static, we run a very simplistic offense, but effective, to this more complex motion, eye candy all over the place. The defense went from this eye candy, complex, blitzing, stunt twist stuff to more of a static 4-3, Tampa 2, rush 4 kind of a philosophy. So Eberflus, typically, you've got 2 deep safeties running either cover 2 or cover 4 concepts. Very much defensive tackle focused, which makes sense for a couple reasons. Number one, you might remember under Pettin and some other defensive coordinators where that defensive line was incredibly important. And it was because everybody else was asked to do a lot of different things. So those guys had to hold up. It was just incredibly important that they did. It also makes sense when you look at them being very, what would you say? It was extremely important they went out and found a defensive tackle. You could almost credit this defensive philosophy shift to us getting Micah Parsons. They were so hell-bent on getting a defensive tackle that they, again, in my opinion, massively overvalued Kenny Clark, who's doing a good job, by the way, so kudos. But the defensive tackles have a lot of work to do up front, specifically the 3 technique, who is referred to as the engine of the defense. But these guys have to not only maintain gaps, but be disruptive, while the linebackers handle more of the zone drop type stuff or run support or whatever they need to do. But the point is, they got their own thing going on. You guys got to handle a lot of the stuff up front. The one thing they do have in common with Hafley is they're very takeaway focused. And again, for pretty much any one of these things, you'd say every defense says that, but you get what you emphasize. And I think with both Hafley and Eberflus, it's very much based on takeaways. And that makes sense in a bend-don't-break defense, because the idea behind a bend-don't-break defense is you might be able to get some yards and you might be able to move down the field, but eventually we're going to cause you to make a mistake. And so you have to train the mistakes. You have to train your defense to be ready to be opportunistic. When the opportunity arises to get a pick or to punch the ball out or something, we have to do it. So keep everything in front of you. Don't allow big plays. Force them to convert lots of first downs, which is hard to do over a long period of time. It's hard to get a first down, much less 5, 6 first downs to be able to get down and score touchdowns. And so the idea is, in that time, we have to create chaos. We gotta create some kind of a play in there. Eberflus very rarely blitzes. They're, again, much more takeaway focused than sack focused. They're not really interested in behind the line of scrimmage disruption like we see in Green Bay. It's more about don't let the stuff behind us cause a lot of problems. It's maintain the line of scrimmage, force them to try to throw a pass short or whatever underneath, and then go out and try to make something happen. So they typically have a 4-man rush, which isn't great when you don't have much of a pass rush, because of course you still want sacks and all that disruption stuff. It's just not the priority for how they run their defense. So while they're doing that, the defensive backs are practicing, tip drills, ball stripping, those types of things, because they're the ones making sure, or that are responsible primarily for making sure that the defense doesn't break. In Indianapolis, Matt Eberflus finished top 10 in takeaways 6 of 7 years as a play caller, including leading the NFL with 22 interceptions while in Chicago in 2022. So through Indy and Chicago, he trained and excelled in takeaways. And he's got guys that have done it before. The DBs in Dallas have done it before. It's just been a little bit of a bumpy ride trying to get that thing off the ground. The DBs have been hurt, first of all, but also just not super productive in what they've been asked to do. Even though I do think this is a much better fit for them. I think the corners are more takeaway focused, more drop into zone, jump the route type of guys, more than man coverage type guys. So this theoretically should be a better fit, but it's just, again, having a hard time getting off the ground. So that's largely what you're looking at. Oso Digizua is the 3-tech. He's the pass rusher. He's the disruptor. He is that sort of engine, with Kenny Clark being next to him, being, responsible for sort of gap management and making sure the run defense is in place so that Oso Digizua can be that 3-tech up front and create whatever disruption they have up there. But again, they're trying to do that with just a 4-man rush so that they can drop more in zone, so that they can be disruptive and have more opportunities and at-bats for stripping the ball, ripping the ball, tipping the ball, getting after the ball. So Packers just need to be disciplined. They need to work their way down the field. Jordan needs to be smart and disciplined, and just typically with these types of defenses, you just take what they give you, and as long as you can execute, you should be able to move down the field and score. It just takes discipline. Now, if the defense can't even execute their own defense, which kind of has been the case, then you can probably do even a little bit more than that. But even at their best with a bend-don't-break style of defense, especially one that doesn't have very good pass rush, you should have time in the pocket to very calmly and effectively and surgically move down the field. But that assumes our offensive line doesn't collapse for the second week in a row. All right, so that is your breakdown there for the offense and defense. Very radical transformation that is off to a little bit of a bumpy start. But again, the concern that I have largely is at some point this could click. and you just hope it doesn't click the week you're playing them, right? This is week 4 into the season. It is a return home. It's not impossible they take at least a step in the right direction, learning the new offensive and defensive philosophies. But given that it's still relatively early in the season, given the lack of, I don't want to say complete lack of talent, because they do have some things that are working, but they are missing some pretty foundational pieces. You know, the offensive line is not fantastic. They don't have a ton of premier players at a lot of premier positions, and the ones that they do are pretty banged up, and in some cases just not playing. Like I said, I think they got 3 guys with high ankle sprains, an early first-round pick, CeeDee Lamb. I mean, these are not minor things. They got 2 banged-up corners. Even if they both play, they're both banged up. So maybe they take a big step, but it just doesn't feel like this is the week that it's going to happen, but we'll see how it goes. All right, let's take a break, and we'll be right back. Okie dokie, now let's go through the spate of games that we have going on here. Why don't we get started with, I think, our first international game? I don't think there's been any others, but Dublin, Ireland is the first game of Sunday. Minnesota Vikings, Pittsburgh Steelers, scheduled for 9:30 a.m. Eastern, so that would be 8:30 a.m. Green Bay Packers time. And I believe the Vikings actually have a London game next week, which is pretty, I would say kind of messed up, but it actually makes a decent amount of sense. If you're going to make a team do 2, you would want that to be a back-to-back so that you're already out there. You know what I mean? There's not that big adjustment thing. In fact, it should be a pretty big advantage for them next week, as one team has to fly out there to meet them, and they've already been there. They're acclimated the whole 9 yards. Vikings and Steelers both 2-1. Obviously, this is a big game for the Green Bay Packers. We need the Steelers to pull one out here. The Vikings are 2.5-point favorites, which is awfully unfortunate, as bad as they looked a couple weeks ago, but they found some newfound success, as I knew they would with Carson Wentz. I just freaking knew it. Hopefully that is short-lived and everything just goes straight to hell. It'll also be nice to be able to wake up and root for Aaron Rodgers against the Vikings again. You know what I mean? That should feel good. Some injury news. Andrew Van Ginkel for the Vikings has a neck injury. J.J. McCarthy and Donovan Jackson are listed as out. Jalen Warren for the Steelers is questionable but expected to play. Joey Porter Jr. questionable with a hamstring injury. Alex Highsmith out with an ankle injury. It's one of those games it really doesn't make sense to put any money on. It doesn't make sense for me to even give you a score prediction, but I'll do it anyways. Just understand that please don't put money down on this. But I've got the Minnesota Vikings winning 26-24. As for the noon game slate, Chargers-Giants, pretty irrelevant. There's one NFC team, and they're a bad NFC team. Chargers are 6.5-point favorites in that game. Although the Giants are at home, so the Chargers will have to fly across the country for that one. But it is the 3-0 Chargers and the 0-3 Giants. I will say, though, this is a wonky one, so it's obviously a very unusual thing. I tried to do a little bit of statistical digging here. It seems unlikely that there are so few times that this has happened, but I've only found 4 instances going back to 1990 where a team is 3-0 on either the East or West Coast, traveling across the country to an 0-3 team. Those teams straight up are 1-3. That is to say, the 3-0 teams have lost to the 0-3 teams 3 out of 4 times. Now, the most recent was 2013 when the Chargers played the Jaguars. They were 7-point favorites and they won 24-6. The last time before that was 1998, so you take that with a grain of salt, but another one that I would be pretty iffy on wanting to touch. With that said, score prediction, 24-18 Chargers win. Titans-Texans, another one that is really not interesting, although the one interesting storyline here is the Texans. There's sort of this weird thing going on where the Texans are generally still seen as a good team with a good quarterback. Although there's a lot of talk, chatter, whatever, about should we be saying that they're a good team with a good quarterback? There was also something recently, and maybe it's already come out, I don't know. I haven't really dug into it. I just kind of saw it in passing. But somebody that is not a nobody, it's like Diana Rossini or somebody like that, made a comment that there's some problems going on behind the scenes with CJ Stroud that she believes will be coming to the forefront sooner than later. I don't know if it's problems specifically with Stroud or if it's problems between Stroud and the team or what the situation is, but it's not good. The Texans are at home, but they're also 0-3. The Titans are too, but I mean, how many 0-3 teams have been 7-point favorites in a game? Well, I can answer that question, actually. 1994, the Oilers were 0-3 against the Cincinnati Bengals. They were 8.5-point favorites, and they won the game by 7. So they did win, but they didn't cover. The 0-3 Saints against the Cardinals in 1996 were 7.5-point favorites. They lost 28-14. And the 2002 0-3 Rams against the Cowboys were 12-point favorites and lost 13-10. So again, I can't help but feel a little bit iffy coming into this game where the straight-up action is 1-2 and they're 0-3 against the spread. I understand Tennessee sucks, but just based on the statistics and everything that I'm looking at, I would borderline either not touch it or lean Tennessee for sure against the spread. That said, my score prediction, which does support Tennessee against the spread, so I think I will bet it because I got the history as well as the math here lining up. My official score prediction, Houston Texans win 19-17. Now, I got to be careful because this is a divisional game, but I think that actually works probably more in my favor because it makes it more iffy, which in my mind makes it less likely that the dominant team dominates as expected. Next game, we got Washington Commanders against the Atlanta Falcons. Washington, one of the teams that I would have come into the season certainly afraid of. I think it's still a team that I'm relatively concerned about. We did beat them, and they are without Jaden Daniels. He is out for his second straight week with a knee sprain, so having them fall behind even further as a result of this, that would have them falling to 2-2, would certainly benefit us down the stretch as we're talking about a playoff push down the season. The Falcons are coming into this at 1-2. That would put them both at 2-2 on the off chance of the Falcons kind of popping off, although it's not looking like that's going to be a thing. The Falcons are 2.5-point favorites in the game, so slight lean toward go Falcons, but it's not super massive. It might be. Down the line, Washington might end up being a powerhouse, and we'll be happy that they lost this game, let's say. But Washington will have Marcus Mariota starting. Terry McLaurin has been ruled out with a quadricep injury. I mean, it's about as bad as you could get for Washington. Falcons are coming off a completely embarrassing 30-0 loss to the Carolina Panthers, one of the worst teams in football. They fired their wide receivers coach. I guess somebody needed to be thrown under the bus. I don't know. But certainly looking for a bounce-back game here. Again, I'd be leery of touching this considering the situation with the quarterback and whatnot with Washington. I'll give you the score prediction of 23-18 Washington, but a lot of that is on the back of kind of expecting Jaden Daniels to play. Not really, because he didn't play last week, so there's not a ton of data with Jaden Daniels in there. Let's call it 20-17 Washington. Saints-Bills. This one runs a little contrary to how I usually think, which is AFC over NFC, but the Saints are a pretty inept team that has nothing to do with anything. The Bills are not a real big threat. They're one of those only if we see them in the Super Bowl, but there is part of that. You don't want to be a dominant team while watching another team be more dominant. You know what I mean? Like you're on a historic run, but at the same time that the Bills are on an even more historic run. Bottom line, I want the Packers to be the best team in football, and the Bills falling off a little bit would be nice. It is the 3-0 Bills at home against the 0-3 Saints, though, so I don't expect anything massive in terms of a actual win for the Saints. But if they could just cover, that would be nice. The Bills are 15-point favorites at home. Score prediction, 30-24 to 23. Buffalo wins. That would be a Saints cover, so I'd be happy with that. I'm certainly not confident enough to bet that one, but there you go. Eagles-Buccaneers is somewhat interesting, if for no other reason than it's going to be really hot in Tampa. It's expected to be 90 degrees on Sunday. And Tampa Bay is not a terrible football team, so just continue to hope that Philly falls, and hopefully one of these days it comes true. It is the 3-0 Eagles against the 3-0 Bucs. It is in Tampa. It is Tampa Bay weather, so they do have quite a bit going for them. Buccaneers do lead the all-time series for whatever that's worth, 13-11. Baker Mayfield is dealing with a bicep injury. He is expected to play, but that's not great. Mike Evans has been ruled out with a hamstring injury. He's going to miss multiple weeks. Obviously, that's not great. We've already got several people, pretty key people on IR. On the Eagles side, Adoree Jackson is doubtful with a groin injury. Keely Ringo potentially going to be starting in his place. Looking at games that reach 90 degrees or hotter, the home teams are winning at a 56% rate, which is not extraordinarily high. They are 40% against the spread, though. It's actually pretty terrible when you look at the, if we say 85 degrees or hotter, and the home team is the underdog by between 0 and 3.5 points, which is this situation, they're winning at 30%, 31% against the spread. They're 9-21. So there is absolutely no home field advantage. I mean, a 3-point, being an underdog by 3 points is not that big of a deal. We've actually already had a game this year that qualifies. That was the Chiefs-Eagles game. Chiefs were 1-point favorites and lost by 3 in that game. Although, if you go back 2 years ago, we had this exact same situation. The Buccaneers were 1-point favorites against the Eagles. The Eagles are 1-point favorites against the Buccaneers. Buccaneers won 33-16. So, do what you want. I'm just giving you the information. Patriots, Carolina Panthers. Patriots are 5.5-point favorites. This is one of those games it's hard to care any less about. Both teams are 1-2. Carolina looking to obviously continue with a dominant performance last week. I don't really care, so why don't we just jump straight into the score prediction. I have actually got the Carolina Panthers winning the game 22-18. Cleveland Browns, Detroit Lions. This one obviously is pretty massive. It's hard to anticipate the Lions losing this game. They are 10-point favorites in the game. Obviously hoping for some kind of a miracle similar to what we saw last week with Packers Browns, where the Cleveland Browns defense is able to stifle the Detroit Lions offense, which is looking quite potent, so that's going to be hard to imagine, especially how inept the Cleveland Browns offense is, because again, the game plan is stifle the Lions offense to such a degree that the Browns offense doesn't have to do all that much. But it's hard to imagine if Cleveland scores like 13 points that they're going to win the game against Detroit Lions offense, but we'll see how it goes. Lions 2-1, looking to go on their third straight win. Cleveland 1-2, with their first win coming last week, obviously. Lions, Taylor Decker, questionable with a shoulder injury. Missed practice, but coaches are hopeful that he'll play. That's obviously pretty massive. For the Browns, though, DeJuan Jones, offensive tackle, is on IR. He's out. Jack Conklin is questionable to return. Defensive tackle Mike Hall is questionable. We'll see. Do have the game quite a bit closer, but still Detroit winning 25-22. It's not an impossible scenario if you think about it, with Detroit's defense really not being super great. That Cleveland could kind of get the offense going a little bit more, with 25 actually being, was it 25? Yeah, 25 actually not being a ton considering what their offense is capable of. We'll see, go Cleveland. Then we get into the afternoon games. 49ers, Jacksonville Jaguars. 49ers enter the game at 3-0. Jacksonville Jaguars 2-1. Obviously the 49ers, therefore, being a bit of a threat. That said, all three wins have been relatively narrow wins, and they've played some pretty bad teams. They played Seattle, which is not a terrible team, but narrowly beat them 17-13. Saints, who are a god-awful team, they beat them by 5, and then played the Arizona Cardinals and just beat them by 1. They don't really play a tough team until a couple weeks from now. They've got the Rams and they got the Buccaneers. This is a relatively cake schedule, though, when you go through it all. You got Falcons, you got Texans might not be too tough. You got the Giants, you've got the Cardinals again, you got the Panthers, the Browns, the Titans, the Colts. My goodness. So, dropping one to the Jacksonville Jaguars would be quite fantastic. They're only 3.5-point favorites in the game. They are at home. Jacksonville obviously having to travel a decent distance. Brock Purdy is expected to return. That should give them a bit of a boost. We shall see. 49ers have a pretty massive loss with the loss of Nick Bosa for the season with an ACL injury. That's probably their best player. Run game has been struggling. McCaffrey has just not been doing it. We'll see if getting their quarterback back could help that. My score prediction, 21-19 Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, part of that might be a little bit iffy because that's been a mathematical prediction based on not having Brock Purdy and what the offense has been without Brock Purdy. So that's a pretty iffy one, but still don't feel super uncomfortable with that prediction. Then we got Colts-Rams, another relatively big game considering the Rams being a pretty potent NFC team. The Rams are sitting at 2-1. Hilariously, the Colts, kind of a threat. Colts come into the game at 3-0. The Rams will be the home team in the game. Devontae Adams has been missing practice with hamstring concerns. Not sure if he's going to be able to play. Offensive tackle Rob Havenstein is questionable. So the Devontae Adams thing in particular is going to be pretty big to keep an eye on. For the Colts, Alec Pierce is ruled out. Right guard Matt Goncalves is going to be out with a toe injury. Cornerback Kenny Moore is out with an Achilles injury. DeForest Buckner is also questionable in the game. So we'll see how for real this team is. The Colts went on to whoop the Miami Dolphins. That seemed like a bigger deal at the time, although Miami is not seeming super great, although it's 38-3-8, so it's pretty massive. Beat the Denver Broncos, which also seemed to be a pretty big deal, although, again, at this point, I'm not entirely sure. The Denver Broncos only win now coming against the Tennessee Titans. And then their third win being the Tennessee Titans, which is also not impressive. However, they whooped them 41-20. So these are not just barely skating by against bad teams. I mean, this is obliterating the Dolphins, barely beating Denver, and then obliterating Tennessee. They currently have the second highest scoring offense in the NFL right now. So we'll see how that goes. This obviously is a pretty for real test. If they go on to beat the Rams, kind of can't count out the Colts anymore. In fact, according to the DVOA model that I'm using, official score prediction 29-22 Indianapolis Colts. And I'm just going to I think I'm going to lean into that one. I'm just going to bet it. Not much. Last week maybe a little gun shy, but I'm going to go ahead and bet that one. Certainly rooting for the Colts for obvious reasons. Then we got another afternoon game, Chicago Bears, Las Vegas Raiders. Another game that, I guess they're underdogs. I was going to say that should go in the favor of the Chicago Bears, but I guess there's kind of two things going on here. One being, I don't know how sold on Chicago everybody is. The other might be maybe believing in the Rams a little bit more. I don't know. The Rams have gone 0-2 the last, or not the Rams, the Raiders have gone 0-2 the last 2 weeks, and it's not been pretty. They lost to the Chargers 20-9 and the Commanders 41-24 last week, and that's without Jaden Daniels. So this is probably the second week in a row now I've looked at this and said I am expecting the Bears to perform much better than what people are expecting. I thought the Bears 2 weeks ago actually looked kind of decent, which is why last week I thought, I don't know, man, they look pretty good. Then last week they did look pretty good. And so I'm kind of back here again saying, I mean, we'll see. It's Chicago. They could absolutely implode at any moment, but they certainly looked like a good enough team to be able to beat the Raiders. But 1-2 Chicago Bears against the 1-2 Raiders. It is in Vegas. If I didn't say it, Raiders are 1-point favorites. Tight end Michael Mayer is out with a concussion. That's pretty massive. On the Bears side, right tackle Darnell Wright is also out. That's pretty big, as much as Bears fans might say they really don't like the guy. That's still pretty massive. Also, linebacker TJ Edwards is going to be out with a hamstring injury. Defensive end Grady Jarrett is out with a knee injury. You've also got Colson Loveland and Kyler Gordon listed as questionable. Don't forget, Jalen Johnson was just placed on IR. So they are down their best corner and have Kyler Gordon now as questionable in this game. So that could end up being relatively brutal. We'll see if second-round pick Ozzie Trapillo ends up stepping in for Darnell Wright. It'll be interesting. Mathematically, it's sitting at a pretty even, it's 24.7 to 24.5 Raiders. It is 25 to 25. Regular DVOA has it 25-24, 1 point advantage for the Raiders. ELO has Chicago winning by almost 10. I'll give you the mathematical 25-24 win for the Raiders while being absolutely on record expecting the Bears to win this game. I hope they don't. I hope that last week was a little bit of a fluke. To be clear, Caleb didn't necessarily grade out as an elite quarterback in that game. He did have 19 completions for almost 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, which statistically looks elite, 142.6 passer rating, but they gave him a 72 passer rating. Passing grade with just 2 big-time throws and 0 turnover-worthy plays. I think it's more of a Ben Johnson's offense kind of coming to fruition and Caleb Johnson just operating within it, which is really the thing that scares me more than anything. I don't care about the highlight reels. I couldn't give a crap about that. What matters is, can this guy just run an offense? Can he just find and throw to the wide open guy on the field? And from what I saw, it looked like he more or less did that last week. So looking forward to hopefully a much worse performance. The good news is there's at least Max Crosby to be concerned with. Not that he's been playing at a super elite level, but they at least have a pass rusher to be concerned with, unlike last week against Dallas, who has absolutely nothing going for it. Baltimore Ravens, Kansas City Chiefs, both teams kind of shockingly at 1-2. Maybe one of the more underrated or under-talked about storylines is Lamar not playing super well. Mahomes isn't either, but I've been saying that for several years. He has not really been an elite quarterback for a few years now. Nobody wants to say it because it's just blasphemy. His name's Pat Mahomes. He must be a mega elite quarterback. But he had a 90 passing grade in 2022. That was down to an 86 in 2023, a 78 in 2024. It's currently a 62 for Mahomes. Mahomes is ranked as the 25th quarterback. He ranks 25th. Lamar is ranked 26th, just behind Pat Mahomes. And Lamar has always been very up and down. This has kind of been a thing with Lamar and we're always kind of captured by the moment a little bit with all these things where when somebody was elite last year, then they're the greatest we've ever seen. It's been a couple years for Lamar, and granted, in a lot of those years where he wasn't, he was hurt. But if you look at his passing grades, they're 56, 83, 75, 66, 72, 83, 93, right? Elite last year with a 90 rushing grade on top of it. Just remarkable. So far this year, a 61.2. His 3 games have been 65, 62, and 57 are his passing grades. He has had 1 big-time throw in each game, as well as 1 turnover-worthy play, on average anyways. It was 0, 1, and 2. So 3 big-time throws, 3 turnover-worthy plays. His passer rating looks phenomenal. So I don't think it's really raised any alarms for anybody in terms of we should be blaming Lamar. He has 722 yards, 9 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. What could possibly be wrong? 141.8 passer rating. But what I'm saying is underneath all of that, the same group, PFF, that gave him a 93 grade last year, is saying he's at a 61 right now. So what is seen as a powerhouse quarterback game has the number 25 and 26th ranked quarterbacks. And again, they're both 1-2. For reference, Caleb Williams is ranked 11th. So, Russell Wilson, who just got benched, ranked 19th. Spencer Rattler, 21st. Bryce Young, 23rd. So, again, just to kind of give you a little context as to what Trevor Lawrence and Pat Mahomes have put on tape so far. Not to say they aren't scary teams, not to say they won't figure it out and turn it around, but it's been brutal and ugly. Ravens are 3-point favorites. Xavier Worthy is expected to return for the Chiefs, which should possibly be pretty massive in this game. Nnamdi Madubuike ruled out for the Ravens. Again, as far as the score prediction here, very, very close. Down to the 10th, 28.8 to 28.3, Kansas City by 0.57 points. If you look at regular DVOA, it's Baltimore 1.75. So very, very close either way. However, Baltimore is a 3-point favorite in the game. And so if I were forced to, I would lean Kansas City against the spread because in both cases, Baltimore does not cover the spread in either case. That said, looking at ELO, Baltimore, the score prediction, 38-21. So I'm not touching it. We'll see. Should be a powerhouse type of game, but might not be. We'll just see how it goes. Finally, Green Bay Packers, Dallas Cowboys. We've already covered this, obviously, pretty extensively. Green Bay Packers are 7-point favorites in the game. And so I will just skip directly to the score prediction. Some good news and some bad news here. The good news is the column that I've been using in terms of which model I've been using consistently, with a couple exceptions, has the Packers winning 25-24, winning by 4.89 points. As for the negative, number one, that does not have them covering the spread. Number two, regular DVOA has Green Bay winning by 0.37 points, so it's basically 50-50. Number three, ELO has Dallas winning 24-22, 23.6 to 22.4. It's Dallas by 1.2 points. So again, if I'm being forced to bet anything, it would be Dallas against the spread. But again, ultimately, all these mathematical things come down to here's what's going to happen based on what has happened up to this point. And that Cleveland game is going to impact things. And yes, if the team that showed up against Cleveland, specifically that offense, shows up against Dallas, it's going to at best be very close. However, if the defense continues doing what it has done, and the offense can wake up and get back to what it was pre-Cleveland, which again, 27-27, those are two relatively decent scoring games, this shouldn't be a problem. Shouldn't be anything to be concerned about. So, there you have it. We'll leave the Monday games because first of all, they're just not interesting. So if we happen to talk about them tomorrow, fine, but you probably won't, and who cares? But we will leave it at that. You all have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you hopefully for Victory Monday tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
You know what it is. Back in Dallas, where the pack always wins. Green and yellow, we real pack, make the crowd bellow. Green and yellow, pack, oh yeah, let the whole world know. Michael Parsons back in town, now you wearing green. Hunt deck down, tearing up the scene, no CD Lamb. Cowboys feeling weak, defense locking in every play. We peak from Lambeau to Texas, we bring that pride. History on the side, we never hide. Dallas roof closed, but we bring the storm. Packers on the ride, tradition reborn. Green and yellow, we rep the pack, make the crowd bellow. Green and yellow, pack, oh yeah, let the whole world know. Terrible towels, now that's so news. Big G on the helmet, nothing then we lose. We blocked in Cleveland, but we bounce right back. Now we in your house, painted green on the map. Long hair, don't care, spirit lives on. From Lombardi, smoke the ride, just gone. Jordan love time, leader of the crew. Dallas can't stop what the pack gon' do. Go pack, go. Go pack, go. Micah in the backfield, Cowboys know. This a green and yellow show. Green and yellow, we rep the pack, make the crowd bellow. Green and yellow, go pack, go, yeah, let the whole world know. Yeah, let the whole world know. Go pack, go, yeah, let the whole world know. She's headstrong, standing tall, Green Bay forever.